converting units of measurement. In this video we're going to think about measurements and how they relate to each other. So let's start off by thinking about length. Now we know that length is measured in millimetres, centimetres, metres and kilometres. But it's really important to make sure that we know the relationship between these units of measurements. There are 10 millimetres in 1 centimetre, and remember that 1 centimetre is about the width of your thumbnail. What about if I measured a pencil and the pencil measured 6 centimetres and I wanted to convert that into millimetres? Now I know that 10 millimetres is 1 centimetre, so I know that to get from 10 millimetres to 1 centimetre, or from 1 centimetre to 10 millimetres, what have I had to do? Well, if I wanted to go from 1 centimetre to 10 millimetres, I can see that that has times by 10. So if I want to go from centimetres to millimetres, I times by 10. So if my pencil measures 6 centimetres, I times by 10, and I get 60 millimetres, so I know that they are the same. 6 centimetres is the same as 60 millimetres. What about if I wanted to do the opposite? What about if I already knew that my pencil measured 60 millimetres and I wanted to work out what that was in centimetres? So this time I'm going from millimetres to centimetres, and to get from 10 to 1, I can see that I need to divide by 10. So if I have 60 millimetres, I divide by 10, do the opposite, and I get 6. So let's recap that. If I want to convert from millimetres to centimetres, I need to divide by 10. And if I want to go from centimetres to millimetres, I need to times by 10. What about if I measured, let's say, a paperclip, and the paperclip measured 30 millimetres, and I wanted to know what would that be in centimetres? I wanted to convert my measurement. Well, let's check. If we're going from millimetres to centimetres, we need to divide by 10 because there are 10 millimetres in a centimetre. So what I need to do is I need to do 30 divide by 10, which is 3, so I know that 30 millimetres is 3 centimetres. Now it's your turn to have a try at converting, so pause the video and then we can check back and see how you did. And I've just given you a little hint to help you here. This is really good to write this down yourself whenever you're converting, because it reminds you of what you need to do. So have a try and then we'll go through the answers. How did you do? Let's go through the answers. So, question 1, 50 millimetres. How many centimetres is that? Well, I'm going to do 50 millimetres divide by 10, which is going to give me 5 centimetres. Question 2, 100 millimetres. How many centimetres is that going to be? That's going to be the same. We're going to do divide by 10 again, and that means I'm going to end up with 10 centimetres. Question 3, how many millimetres is equal to 4 centimetres? So I have my centimetres and I want to convert into millimetres, so I need to times by 10 this time, and that's going to give me 40 millimetres. Question 4, how many millimetres is the same as 22 centimetres? And my answer is going to be 220 millimetres, because I had centimetres and I needed to times by 10 to get millimetres. Question 5, how many centimetres is equal to 3 millimetres? Well, again, let's look at the diagram. I've got millimetres and I want to end up with centimetres, so I'm going to divide by 10 this time. So I'm going to do 3 divided by 10, which is going to give me 0.3 centimetres. And the last question, how many millimetres is the same as 1.5 centimetres? This one's a little trickier because I've got a decimal here. So I've got 1.5 and I need to times by 10. So that's going to give me the answer 15 millimetres. Okay, what about if we think about metres now? So how can we compare them to centimetres? So first of all, we need to consider how many centimetres are in a metre. There are 100 centimetres in a metre, and just to remind yourself to think about these measurements, we know that a metre, that's roughly the length of a guitar. So if you bear that in mind, that 1 metre is like the length of a guitar. So I know that 1 metre is 100 centimetres. Well, let's imagine that I measured a path around my garden and my path measured 7 metres. What would that be in centimetres? Well, to go from 1 to 100, that means that I'm timesing by 100. So if I want to go from metres to centimetres, I need to times by 100. So 7 metres times by 100 is going to give me 700 centimetres. What about if I measured my garden shed, for example, and my garden shed was 200 centimetres wide, and I wanted to know what was that in metres? Well, in this case I would do the opposite, because I want to go from centimetres to metres. This time I'm going to divide by 100, because if I'm at 100 and I want to get to 1, I'm going to divide by 100. So 200 centimetres divided by 100 is 2. So my garden shed is 2 metres wide. Now it's your turn to have a try at converting. So have a look at these centimetres and metres, pause the video, and then we'll check back and see how you got on. And just to help you, I've put a little reminder to give you a hint about how you're going to convert these measurements. So off you go. How did you get on? Let's go through the answers. So question 1, 300 centimetres, and we want to know what that is in metres. So we're going to divide by 100, and that's going to give us the answer 3 metres. Question number 2, 800 centimetres, that's going to be 8 metres. Question 3, how many centimetres is 9 metres? So this time we're going to have to go from metres to centimetres. We're going to have to times by 100. So that gives me 9 times 100 is 900 centimetres. Now question 4 is a little trickier because it's got a decimal point there. So we want to know how many centimetres is the same as 5.4 metres. Well, I'm going to go from metres to centimetres. That means I need to times by 100. So if I'm timesing 5.4 by 100, I'm going to get 540 centimetres. And question 5, 660 centimetres. Well, this time I've got centimetres and I want to convert to metres, so I'm going to divide by 100. 660 divided by 100 is 6.6 metres. Let's have a think about what we've covered so far. So we've looked at millimetres, centimetres and metres, and let's remind ourselves of how we go from one to the other. So if I have millimetres and I want to get to centimetres, what I'm doing here is I'm dividing by 10. And if I have centimetres and I want to get to metres, I'm going to divide by 100. What about though if I have millimetres and I want to convert it to metres? Well, if I have divided by 10 and divided by 100, what I've actually done is I've divided by 1000. And a really great way to remember this is that milli actually means 1000. So we know that there are 1000 millimetres in a metre. What about if I wanted to convert from the other direction? So if I had metres and I wanted to convert to centimetres, I know that I'm going to be timesing by 100. If I had centimetres and I wanted to convert it to millimetres, so if I wanted to convert from metres to millimetres, well, I'm going to times by 100 and times by 10, which is going to mean I'm going to times by 1000. And remember that milli means 1000. There are 1000 millimetres in a metre, and centi means 100. That's because there are 100 centimetres in a metre. What about kilometres? Well, kilo also means 1,000, so that's a good way to remember that there are 1,000 metres in a kilometre or a kilometre. If I measure the distance from my house to the swimming pool, I know that that's 5 kilometres. So what will this be in metres? So if I'm converting from kilometres to metres, I can see here that to go from 1 to 1,000 means I need to times by 1,000. So if I wanted to work out what 5 kilometres was in metres, I need to do 5 times 1,000, which gives me 5,000 metres. If I was going in the opposite direction and I wanted to convert from metres to kilometres, then I need to divide by 1,000. Now it's your turn to try some questions, so pause the video, have a go, and then we'll go back through the answers. Don't forget the little reminder here to remind you, are you dividing by 1,000 or are you timesing by 1,000 when you do your conversions? How did you do? Let's go through the answers. Question number 1, 6,000 metres, that's going to be 6 kilometres. Number 2, 4,500 metres. Okay, so 4,500 divided by 1,000, that's going to give us 4.5 kilometres. Question number 3, how many metres is equal to 7.2 kilometres? So we've got a decimal here, so we've got kilometres and we want to turn it into metres, so I know I need to times by 1,000. So my answer is going to be 7,200 metres. Question number 4, how many metres is the same as 1.9 kilometres? It's going to be the same idea as it was in question 3. We've got kilometres and we want to convert into metres, so I'm going to times by 1,000. That's going to give me 1,900 metres. And the last question, question 5, I have 500 metres and I want to turn it into kilometres. So if I have metres, I want to turn it into kilometres, I need to divide by 1,000. So 500 metres divided by 1,000 is 0.5 kilometres. We can check that because we know that there are 1,000 metres in a kilometre, so 500 is going to be half, and that's our decimal for a half. Let's recap how we convert these measurements. So if we're going from millimetres to centimetres, we need to divide by 10. If we're going from centimetres to metres, we need to divide by 100. And if we're going from metres to kilometres, we need to divide by 1,000. If we're converting from kilometres to metres, we need to times by 1,000. If we're going from metres to centimetres, we need to times by 100. And if we're going from centimetres to millimetres, we need to times by 10. You can use exactly the same method when you're working with weight and capacity. So just remember that milli and kilo mean 1,000 and centi means 100. So we know that there are 1,000 milligrams in a gram because milli means 1,000. There are 1,000 millilitres in 1 litre, and there are 100 centilitres in 1 litre. And exactly the same method applies here. If we want to go from grams to milligrams, I need to times by 1,000. And if I want to go from milligrams to grams, I need to divide by 1,000. Now it's your turn to try some conversions. So pause the video, have a go, and then we can see how you did. And just to remind you, have a look here at the little reminders of how to perform these conversions. Also remember that if your question involves a decimal, as some of these questions do, don't forget to use your place value chart to make sure that you're dividing and timesing correctly. How did you do? Let's go through the answers. So question number 1, 5 kilograms is 5,000 grams. 3.6 litres is 3,600 millilitres. 6.7 metres is 670 centimetres. 2,500 grams is 2.5 kilograms. 4.2 centimetres is 42 millimetres. 16 kilometres is 16,000 metres. 5 metres is 5,000 millimetres. And 800 centimetres is 0.008 kilometres. If you made any mistakes, remember to have a look at the diagrams again and then carefully write your numbers into the place value chart to make sure that you're either timesing or dividing correctly.